Welcome to Mysteries and Crime, where we delve into the shadows of humanity's darkest deeds. Tonight, we uncover a story that unfolded behind the closed doors of an ordinary Indianapolis home, a story of betrayal, silence, and suffering. Clue question: how did so many people witness Sylvia's pain, yet no one acted? In 1965, 16-year-old Sylvia Likens died after enduring months of brutal abuse. The crime shocked Indiana and the nation. Allegedly orchestrated by her caregiver, Gertrude Baniszewski, and involving neighborhood children, the case revealed chilling truths about human behavior and the consequences of unchecked cruelty. October 26th, 1965. A call came into police headquarters from a modest home on East New York Street in Indianapolis. The voice on the line belonged to Gertrude Baniszewski, who calmly reported that a girl in her care had died. Officers arrived to find Sylvia Marie Likens lying lifeless on a stained mattress, her frail body covered in bruises, burns, and cryptic carvings etched into her skin. She wore a faded house dress. Her lips were split, her fingernails broken. Her emaciated frame spoke volumes, even in silence. The official cause of death: brain hemorrhage due to repeated blows to the head, combined with shock from malnutrition and trauma. According to early reports, Gertrude claimed Sylvia had been out of control, that she had run away, returned, and collapsed. But investigators immediately noticed inconsistencies. Sylvia's younger sister, Jenny, was in the house, shaking, pale, whispering something barely audible to the officers. "If you get me out of here, I'll tell you everything." The officers took note. Neighbors gathered outside the home, murmuring in disbelief. None of them, they said, had known what went on inside. But behind those peeling walls, a nightmare had unfolded, and it had gone on for months. Sylvia Marie Likens was born on January 3rd, 1949, the third of 5 children in a working-class family. Her parents, Lester and Betty Likens, were carnival workers, constantly moving with the seasonal flow of their profession. Sylvia and her siblings often found themselves cared for by relatives or acquaintances, people they barely knew. By the summer of 1965, Sylvia and her younger sister Jenny, who suffered from polio and walked with a limp, were left in the care of a woman their parents thought they could trust, Gertrude Baniszewski. Sylvia was known to be kind, soft-spoken, and protective of Jenny. Teachers described her as polite and shy. She liked soda, roller skating, and playing with dolls, still very much a child. But within weeks of arriving at the Baniszewski home, that innocence would begin to erode. According to court records, Sylvia was often denied food, slapped for imagined offenses, and isolated from others in the household. Neighbors recalled seeing her eyes downcast, her frame shrinking more each time she passed by. When asked about the marks on her arms or face, she allegedly responded with quiet denial. Jenny, too afraid to speak up, watched helplessly. By the time the authorities were alerted, it was too late for Sylvia, but her story would become a cautionary tale, a grim reminder of what can happen when trust is misplaced, and silence becomes complicity. Gertrude Baniszewski was a single mother of 7, 41 years old, gaunt, sickly, and reportedly overwhelmed. She lived in poverty, surviving on child support checks and neighborhood charity. To those who knew her casually, she was strict, but harmless. Behind closed doors, however, a different persona allegedly emerged. Gertrude agreed to care for Sylvia and Jenny for $20 a week, money that didn't always arrive on time. As stress mounted, according to testimony, she began targeting Sylvia as a scapegoat for her frustrations. She accused her of lying, stealing, spreading rumors about her daughters. What followed was a systematic campaign of abuse, and Gertrude didn't act alone. Her teenage children, most notably Paula, then 17, and neighborhood youths, including Coy Hubbard, Richard Hobbs, and John Baniszewski Jr., were all allegedly involved in Sylvia's torment. Some delivered beatings, others humiliated her. All participated, whether by action or silence. Paula, according to court testimony, once punched Sylvia so hard it broke her own wrist. The cast later used to strike Sylvia again. Richard and Coy, both boys from the neighborhood, were allegedly lured in by Gertrude's twisted encouragement. They kicked, burned, and branded the young girl, sometimes laughing during the acts. What began as punishment spiraled into cruelty, then horror. To law enforcement, it was unthinkable. A house full of children turned into accomplices under the influence of one woman. The question haunted detectives and the public alike. How could so many take part and no one speak out? The torture of Sylvia Likens began slowly, subtly, then escalated into one of the most disturbing cases in American criminal history. It started with slaps, insults, and accusations. Gertrude Baniszewski, fueled by resentment and deteriorating health, allegedly became convinced that Sylvia had spread rumors about her daughters, chiefly Paula. Other allegations included theft of candy or improper hygiene, minor offenses if they happened at all, met with horrifying punishments. Sylvia was denied meals, forced to eat leftovers or scraps from the trash. According to witness statements, Gertrude instructed the other children to call Sylvia degrading names and encouraged them to hurt her. This was not discipline. It was ritualized cruelty. As the weeks progressed, Sylvia was made to strip naked in front of others. She was beaten with belts, wooden paddles, and fists. The burns on her body came from cigarettes, pressed against her skin by hands that should have never held such power. Then came the branding. According to court transcripts, one day in October, Gertrude told Richard Hobbs and her son John to write something on Sylvia's stomach. They used a heated sewing needle to carve 4 words, "I'm a prostitute and proud of it." The process reportedly took over 30 minutes. Sylvia screamed, begged, fainted. When she regained consciousness, they forced her to look in a mirror. Later, she was locked in the basement, stripped of clothes, denied food, beaten daily. She was not permitted to use the bathroom, left to lie in her own waste. Sometimes the children were told they could practice wrestling on her. They kicked her, jumped on her, laughed. Gertrude allegedly orchestrated it all, even creating rules for who could hurt Sylvia and how. The last week of Sylvia's life was marked by starvation and collapse. Her speech slurred, her breathing labored. According to Jenny, Sylvia whispered one night, "I know you don't want me to die, but I'm going to anyway." On October 26th, Sylvia tried to stand, but fell. Her head struck the basement wall. She lost consciousness. Gertrude tried to cover her tracks, telling the children to scrub Sylvia clean. She crafted a note, dictated by Gertrude, written in Sylvia's trembling hand, that claimed she had run away and been abused by a gang of boys. But Sylvia never woke up to sign it. Her lifeless body was discovered hours later. When the police arrived, Gertrude presented the note as proof, but it fell apart under questioning. And Jenny's quiet whisper, opened the door to the truth. One officer later remarked, "In all my years, I've never seen anything like it, not from a parent and not from children." It was no longer just a murder investigation. It was a descent into the darkest corners of human behavior. When officers arrived at the Baniszewski home, the initial report that Sylvia had returned home after running away and died mysteriously raised immediate suspicion. It wasn't just the bruises and burns, it was the sheer volume of them, spread across her arms, legs, scalp, and torso. The note Gertrude presented seemed staged, and most unsettling were the words carved into Sylvia's flesh. Detectives separated family members and began interrogations. The breakthrough came quickly. Jenny Likens, Sylvia's younger sister, reportedly whispered to one officer, "Get me out of here, and I'll tell you everything." Her testimony opened the floodgates. Within hours, police arrested Gertrude Baniszewski, her daughter Paula, and several neighborhood children. The statements were chillingly consistent. Children admitted to taking turns beating Sylvia at Gertrude's command. What emerged was not just a single perpetrator, but an entire household complicit in cruelty. In 1965, forensic science lacked today's sophistication. Still, the crime scene told a clear story. Sylvia's body displayed over 100 individual injuries, burns, contusions, open wounds, and deep lacerations. The carving on her stomach was undeniable, still raw when discovered. The basement floor where she had been kept showed signs of blood, human waste, and makeshift bedding. A thin, stained blanket, an empty water bowl. Her final days spent in squalor. Fingerprints and biological evidence were collected, but the bulk of the case rested on physical trauma and testimony. Forensic pathologist Dr. Arthur Keeble confirmed the cause of death as cerebral edema from repeated blows, worsened by malnutrition and septic shock. Though limited by the era's tools, the sheer brutality of the evidence was overwhelming, and Sylvia's own body became the most powerful witness. Indianapolis was stunned. News of the torture and death of 16-year-old Sylvia Likens sent shockwaves through the community. Parents held their children closer. Neighbors looked upon each other with suspicion, and questions echoed through quiet suburban streets. How did this happen? Could it happen again? According to local reports, some neighbors admitted they had heard screams, seen bruises, yet said nothing. Fear? Denial? Shame? The case became a symbol of collective failure. Churches held vigils, school counselors were overwhelmed. And in whispered tones, the question lingered: how many people had seen Sylvia's suffering and done nothing? The press descended on East New York Street almost instantly. Headlines from coast to coast branded the Baniszewski house a house of horrors. Reporters described the crime in stark detail, using words like inhuman, sadistic, and unthinkable. The Indianapolis Star ran daily updates. National outlets picked up the story, framing it as both a tragedy and a warning. Some questioned the role of poverty, others, the influence of community apathy. But the media frenzy did more than inform. It pressured the courts, galvanized public outrage, and forced a city to confront a nightmare it hadn't wanted to see. Though the evidence pointed clearly toward Gertrude Baniszewski and several co-defendants, many were left asking a chilling question. How did so many people become perpetrators? Some theorized that Gertrude's declining mental health, allegedly fueled by amphetamine use and depression, created a warped moral environment inside her home. Others believed the children were manipulated, caught in a cycle of peer pressure and fear, punished if they didn't participate. Still others asked how teachers, neighbors, and even Sylvia's parents didn't intervene. Reports noted that Sylvia's injuries had escalated over weeks. Rumors suggest a minister visited the house once, allegedly unaware of the abuse. Some neighbors heard screams, but claimed it was just children playing. Law enforcement would later testify that the crime stemmed from a perfect storm of dysfunction, neglect, and psychological domination. No random killer, no stranger danger. Instead, evil born of familiarity. The trial of Gertrude Baniszewski began in April of 1966. Prosecutors described her as the ringleader, who methodically tortured a child to death. Her defense argued she was mentally unwell, overwhelmed by responsibility, manipulated by her own children. Paula Baniszewski, pregnant at the time, also stood trial, along with John Baniszewski Jr., Coy Hubbard, and Richard Hobbs. After weeks of testimony and graphic evidence, the jury returned its verdict. Gertrude Baniszewski was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Paula received a sentence of second-degree murder, later reduced on appeal. The boys were convicted of manslaughter. Each served less than 10 years. Gertrude was paroled in 1985, under a new name. To many, that was the final injustice. Sylvia's tombstone would later read, "Our darling daughter," but the wounds her story left ran far deeper than stone. Decades later, questions remain. Could Sylvia have been saved if someone had spoken up sooner? What of the neighbors who claimed ignorance, the classmates who saw the bruises, the adults who visited that home? And perhaps most disturbingly, what allowed a group of ordinary children to become accomplices in torture? Some psychologists have tried to answer. Others simply say evil thrives in silence. Though convictions were handed down, the emotional impact on Jenny Likens and surviving family members was immeasurable. She never fully spoke publicly, only once stating, "She was my sister, and I couldn't save her." The case of Sylvia Likens became a defining moment in child abuse awareness. It led to stricter, mandatory reporting laws in Indiana and inspired discussions across the country about the responsibilities of communities, schools, and caregivers. Sylvia's story is now taught in psychology courses, legal studies, and social work programs. Memorials have been built in her honor. But more than anything, it serves as a grim warning, a plea for vigilance, because monsters don't always hide in shadows. Sometimes they sit at the dinner table. Clue reminder: how did so many people witness Sylvia's pain, yet no one acted? What are your thoughts on the Sylvia Likens case? Let us know in the comments below. And remember to subscribe for more real-life mysteries. As always, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.